I'm sorry, have you explained that part where uh, on what basis we have to separate, or on what basis some code goes to the service and some goes to the other files? Like what would the service hold and what would the rest of the files hold?
Yes,
Uh,
yes, not completely clarified. I was just explaining that earlier. So everything related to the business logic, like interacting with the database, checking for errors, all if checks and all, every business logic part will go into service. Why is it so? Because the same service might be used by the GraphQL API and it might also be used by the Express API. So we might have the GraphQL mutation or query interacting with the same service, also a REST API. Now, this could have been a case like where we are beginning to work with REST APIs, and in future we are slowly migrating to GraphQL. So we wanted the ability that we do not have to code up our business logic again. So all of that part is created inside of the service class here. Now, how to interact with this service? It's just simple. So I moved on to user resolver. This is where all of the GraphQL code resides. So I imported the service, user service here. I created an instance of that service in the constructor. When I create an instance, after that I have all the methods available here. Now from this code, we are creating that GQL file. All of your code there from TypeScript is converted into this GraphQL file with queries and mutations. And
is the
in
process
TypeScript,
automated?
yes, the process is automated, creating that .gql file. So all of this code here, the queries and the mutations that you create using the TypeScript decorator, this will be converted into that file automatically. So for
Okay.
example, we created a user resolver here. A user resolver, we mark this class as a GraphQL resolver because that is required to generate that file. After that, we created a query here. So the query name is obtained from here. So find all users, users login, create user. And this is the same thing that you can see in the schema. When we go to the docs here, we can check the query names and mutation names are exactly what was described there, right?
Okay.
So the user query, it will return a user response here whenever we query for users. So for example, as for authentication, so our next step would be to authenticate.
This will work same as in our AWS server, right?
Yeah, the same way. Once it is deployed, it works the same.
Is there new changes or it's already deployed?
No, I haven't deployed this on the AWS server. I would have to ask a fund, but
We
I
deployed
don't
it.
remember any significant
Uh,
changes to after
okay.
what we deployed last time.
Okay. Okay. Then I think it's updated. Can you try the same thing in that server? I'll send you the link.
Sure.
That way we'll know if it is updated or not.
So we log in. Once we are successfully logged in, we receive a JWT token, and to access any authenticated endpoint, we just provide that JWT token in the HTTP headers, the authorization header. Once you have provided that, you are able to access the protected endpoints. If that's
Sorry to
that's
interrupt.
yeah,
One
yeah,
question I have. So, when you're authenticating, right? So, from the user, from the client end. So,
yes.
how would that username and password be transferred? So, will it be the plain text, or is it basic authentication, or some other encoding and maybe other libraries are used? So how is it done actually?
It's transferred over GraphQL, and GraphQL transfer everything as plain text. So
Okay,
the
so
the
basically
way
we are exposing the passwords over HTTPS, right? So only
yes,
layer that
yes,
we are relying on is TLS security there.
exactly.
Is
This is
it?
the only
Okay.
way we are relying on.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so I'll first have to create a user here. Come on. Wow. Shubham, we are receiving some MongoDB error here, I think.
Okay, so oh yeah, so there is authentication on MongoDB. Yeah. Okay, fine. So we need to update that. Is it a
Okay.
.env file?
Yes, .env file is there.
Okay, fine. We'll update that.
And the format is just this simple one where you provide everything in a single URI.
Okay.
So, guys, you know the structure now, right? The backend folder structure. Hi, everyone. Uh,
Yes, we understood.
okay, so you got the rough idea how it's working, how the things are organized. So, one or two more things that I would like to add here is that in each of the module, we have this entity file. This is how the MongoDB schema and also the GraphQL schema, the return type is created. So I have created the user model here. Okay. So everything related to queries and all or the return types, we create them separately. So we have the resolvers here. We had the queries here, also the mutation. But what is the return type of those queries and what is the input type of those queries is defined in different files. So for example, I have a user login file. So for that, I imported the user login input from here, inputs. Now this user login input is different from the type that I displayed earlier. That is just TypeScript type, which is used in the service. This input, which is not starting with an I, is not an interface, it is a GraphQL type. So for example, for user login, I have it here, user login input. So like every resolver file needs to be decorated with a resolver. To mark an input, you need to decorate it with input type. And then this is the way of defining the input schema or the return schema, where the field is the thing which marks the type of the property. So we have a property and we are saying it is of type string and it is required. So by default field is a string and by default it is also required. So we didn't have to make any changes here. But suppose during login, I had something else like a base URL thing to provide to backend, but it's optional. So I'll mark it nullable true. This time question mark. So this question mark part is for TypeScript. This is how we indicate to TypeScript that this is optional. So further in the services and in the resolver, this is how you would know that this property is optional. For example, just check here. Okay. Input.c base URL. Here we know that it is a property which may or may not be present there. Email and password will always be there, but base URL is question mark, so it is optional. Now the question mark part was for TypeScript, and this nullable part, and this is what defines it for the GraphQL schema. So here, if we check it in the GraphQL file, what was that? User login input. Let's just search it here. Write it down. Okay. See, password required, email required, which is marked by the exclamation. For base URL, we don't have any exclamation because that's optional thing. Similarly, if I wanted to change the type here, so I would just import a different type from here. Apart from string, we have int. Similarly, we have float in GraphQL. So this is how we define types here. Once that is done, I should also change the TypeScript type. Okay. Once that is done.
So looks more like a Swift code here.
What does it look like?
Swift code.
Okay, I haven't operated.
Yeah, it does look like that.
JavaScript looks like a lot of languages when you modify it. Everybody's twisting JavaScript.
True.
Okay, Aditya, where is the return schema?
Just a second. I'm showing that too.
Okay.
So this was how the inputs are generated using the input type decorator. And to generate the return schema, we are putting it here in the entity file. This is where we are combining the Mongo schema and the GraphQL schema. So instead of input type, this time we have object type. So this is the only difference between GraphQL type and input. So this time we have object type. Rest everything here will remain same, like that field thing. Just the way it was in that schema, right? And that file will be converted into this type, the return type. Along with the object type file, we also combined these options. Now, these model options in pre, these are imported from TypeGoose, which is just mongoose in a TypeScript form. So the hooks that we run before saving to hash the password before saving it into database, that hook is here. And everything that we want to describe in our Mongo schema is defined using property. The username is a property which is required. ID will be generated by default. Email is also a property which is required. Then it should be unique and it should be indexed. Similarly, we have password property required. And this is how we describe the defaults for created in it and updated it. So that was it about the backend code.
Okay. I started recording. So one small request for the people who haven't joined this meeting, I would be sharing a video on the folder structure and where to put what code. So can you really go quick on the folder and explain what to put where. Real quick, in 5 minutes.
Sure, sure, sure. Just a second. So the main folder structure here is this modules folder. Everything from the module folder is imported into the app file. For example, we have a user module where we have the domain user and everything related to that domain, like the Mongoose model or the services, the business logic, the GraphQL things, everything is present inside of that module. From that module for GraphQL, we just have to import this file, the resolver file. We import the resolver file and we integrate it here. Just pass it into an array. In future, if we might have a post module, we'll just pass the post resolver into this array. This way. What's inside of a module? So for example, if we go through the user module, we have the all of the core business logic inside of the user service file. Okay, so all the file which are ending with this service ts are supposed to be carrying our business logic. So it is just a class with these methods, and everything related to that, like the checks and returning the errors or comparing the passwords or generating the JWT token, that logic is written here. Database interaction is also present here. Now, where is this database file imported from? User model. This is imported from that entity file. So the entity file is where we are describing our GraphQL return type using the object type thing and the MongoDB model. Okay, and we just export it from this file, get model for class, and we can simply use it here after importing it. Apart from these two files, for every service, we might have some validations to validate the input that we receive from the front end. So that validation logic is written inside of this file, user validations, using Joey. Then we went through entity, service, and validations. Then we have a resolver file. This is where we define the GraphQL queries and the mutations. So we mention the return type, we mention the input type, then we just delegate that thing to the service. Nothing else is handled here. Only the authorization, the return type, and the input type. Right? Apart from that, we have this inputs file. This is where we create the inputs for our GraphQL. They are similar to how we create a return type, just stored different in this folder because we might have a lot of inputs. So those inputs are just included inside of our resolver file. So these are the things that I had discussed up till now. Then we also have a DTOs file. This is something that I had not discussed earlier. So what we do in the DTOs file is we combine the different return types that might be returned as a response for any resolver. For example, I have this one, create user. Now if you check in the docs, we see create user. It returns something of type user register result. So we check here, what is user register result? It is a union of type user and user exists error. That means the response could be either of type name user or it could be of type name user exists error. The type name is here. So it is a combination of these two types. It could be either one of these results, user and user exists error, and we receive the schema along with that. So in this file, the DTOs file, we are just combining the different return types. So for example, for the user register, I combined the user exists error, like the before registering we check if the user already exists or not. So we created the user exists error and we combine it with the user entity which we imported from here. So we created a union type here. So all the data transfer objects, that is the enhancements of the return type, are stored in this file. So that is it, what it's about. Sure. Just a second. Now, services which may not be part of your GraphQL, like which are not the GraphQL services, could be put here. So for example, I have the password service here. To hash a password or to compare a password, the code is here. Similarly, in future, if we integrate, let's say, a email service or a messaging service like Twilio, we'll create all those services here. The typings folder, this as I described earlier, all the TypeScript types will be defined here. So that in future, if we want to share these types with a front end, we can just create a module out of it. Apart from that, we have utils. Now, utils had that the base error class. Apart from that, we had that Joey utility for checking those errors. And did we export anything? Yes, okay. So we have auth checker here. Now, this auth checker is required by the main Apollo server. So we defined it only once. So what Apollo does is, so we provided the auth checker here, right? From the auth checker, this is kind of like a Node.js middleware that we had in Express. Now in Express, every middleware was executed before a route that we include it in. So if we wanted to validate a route, we would just put a auth middleware there. So this is similar to that. We provide it once to Apollo here, but Apollo doesn't run it on every request. It will only run it when we ask for it. For example, here, authorize. So only then that particular middleware will be run. Apart from that, we have what middlewares, current user thing. Now, this is something that will be run on every request. So that's why this is just a simple Express middleware, and I integrated it here, current user. So what this does is it expects the authorization token, and if it is present, it decodes it and attaches it to the request, current user. But no error is thrown from here. Even if you didn't provide an authorization, it will still let you proceed because maybe we don't need to authorize the route. So this will just try to decode the current user property. And here we define that current user is optional, like it may or may not be present. Then this current user thing is checked by the auth checker that I described earlier. So whenever we provide that auth decorator to a particular query, this code will be run. It will extract the user from the request. If it is not present, it will send you an error. So that's the middleware thing. And the last thing that we need to go through is logger. So this is just the Winston module, and it creates the log file for anything happening on backend. So we create a logger here, we create the GraphQL logger here, and we just attach it in the app file. Alright. We export the logger from here so that we can log something from any module. So like we imported it here, and to log something we just do it like this, logger.info. So each of that thing is logged into the console by default. But if there are errors, then those will be logged here in your files. Right now there is none present because we didn't. Okay, here it is, logs. So logs folder will be created and your logs will be here. Every error that we encountered, any exceptions, or just the usual info. Okay, so that's it for the folder structure on the backend.
Does this code base also include the roles right management?
Not yet, but we can include it later.
Because I saw
Role,
some code.
yeah, this thing. So it is expecting the roles from here, and if the roles are present, so what we will do here is, I don't remember the exact syntax right now, but it was something like this. You can check it in that type GraphQL, but this authorization thing, this authorize middleware, it accepts the roles, an array of roles. For example, I say that admin and consider something else. So these two roles only should be able to access it. So auth checker will check here. If the roles array is provided and if it matches the user roles, then it will let you go. It will return true. If it does not matches, then access denied error will be sent. See, we just need to include our Mongo URI here and the JWT secret. So once the end satisfaction, environment satisfaction is fulfilled, then to run it in development, we just need this command here. Yarn start dev or npm run. So this command, and your development server is ready to go, and we can access it at localhost 3000. I don't remember. It's not hard coded, but we have an option here, I think. Just let me check. Okay, right now it's hard coded, yeah. Okay, thanks.
So Aditya, I'm able to run it locally now. So in the environment file, what we need to add in the JWT field?
It could be anything like the JWT. This key could be anything, any random string.
Okay.
It is just for the integrity of the our JOT token.
Okay. Yeah.
And then other question, anybody else?
I guess we are clear here. So one thing. So Shubham, are you saying something?
No, no, I was just
So I have one question for the rules part. So do we have any ACL setup? So is it an access control list based or just a set of roles that will be seeking the permission through a code, or is it set ACL through the database itself? So how is that role management defined? Did we discuss that, or is it the part that is remaining for the discussion?
Yeah, we haven't discussed that yet.
Okay, okay, got it. Okay, that's it from my side.
Yeah, yeah, I will.
Yes.
Yes, they have in
Yes.
the front end.
Back.
No, 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 not yet. But the thing that we want to finalize today is whether we distribute the task without the project board or not. And if we are distributing it with the project board, using the project board, then which project board to use.
I
Okay.
guess,
So
anyways,
for
if
timing, I guess.
sorry. So, anyways, if we have a task list in our mind, no. So before going to the board, we can just give a vague idea on what are the tasks that are available to be done, so that they'll be prepared mentally. So when the task is actually on the board, they'll be able to catch up soon enough.
Yes. So in that regard, the initial thing that we'll be doing on our back end that we'll be starting off with is adding more fields to the user schema, because I have just included 4 or 5 very least amount of required fields. So finalizing the user schema, then doing our authentication tasks, that is sign up, sign in, possibly social authentication too. So these are the things that we'll be doing. And to work with those things and to be able to integrate social authentication, we'll be using Passport.js. So Passport.js schemas along with the JWT scheme. So that is something I think all of the guys who are working on backend should now look into before you receive the tasks finally.
It would be great if you
Uh,
could share
Sh-
some resources.
Shubham sir, I just wanted to ask whether have you allotted the task for the backend and the database? Like, I guess we have not yet started at that portion.
The task list are ready, but we haven't shared with anyone yet.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah. So what Sai was suggesting, and I also agree with him, is that we share it with you guys so that you know uh, what is it coming, and you will be prepared mentally. And when it is actually on the board, then you guys can decide. Okay, I want to go with this task or that task.
Yeah, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. So for the backend, we have actually done that part, like dividing it into task and subtask, and it's already there. Aditya will be sharing that with you. For the front end, Sai has done it, and he has a PDF. He will be sharing with the front end members.
Sure.
Hello. So, am I clear? Audible?
Yes, yes,
Okay. So, basically, for the front end team, so do we have PDF shared in the group? Let me share the screen. I'm on the mobile right now. So, is the screen visible?
yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, I hope this is visible. So, basically, it is the folder structure that we are going to maintain. and the components that are that we are going to design. So anyways, this is the initial draft. You may add suggestions, or we can work in with this as well. Okay, so first of all, we have 3 pages wireframes with us, as Basu and Shubham has come up with. The sign up, sign in, and homepage, right? So, judging from the components that are available and segregating it, we have button component, a borderless button, and an icon component, and circular image icon, text box, header. So these are the components that we need to work out. So I guess I should have put a image of that wireframe. So everybody has that wireframe in hand. Hello.
Um, do we have it?
Do we have
I don't think we have shared it.
wireframes? UI wireframe? Do we have it?
No.
Everybody from the
No.
front end team. Okay. Okay. We'll share that. I guess Shubham also have it, and I also have it. I'll share that wireframe. So basically, it has a sign up screen, which has a material UI kind of a text box. When you type it out, the label goes up, right? When you the basically the placeholder goes up, and when you come out of it, out of focus, it comes back to the placeholder's place. So we have a text box here, so that needs to be developed. So hence the text box. Then we have icons. We have social icons down there. So it is basically buttons which does not have border, and an icon. So we have a borderless button imposed on the child is an icon here. So we need those 2 elements here. Then we have the home screen, which we have an header, and the create post tag, where you create the posts that is present in the right hand side. Once you get the UI wireframe in hand, you will be able to visualize what I'm talking about. So currently I'm giving you a vague idea, at least you have that in mind when you get that. So we have postcard, where the card which has a title on it, saying that what post that is meant to be. Then we have a description. Then we have a circular icon there. It is basically like a chat head, where a user profile image will be shown. Then we have clap, like, or maybe comment icons in the bottom. It's basically like a Facebook card that we see on a day-to-day basis. Then we have trend list in the left-hand side in the home screen. The trend list have the most clapped or maybe 4 to 5 most clapped posts that are available, and maybe other posts or links that are shared in the platform. So that we need to discuss what to put in. But yes, we have a placeholder in the left side where we have a trending list. So when it comes to folder structure, we basically have a root folder. On the outer root folder, we have app. Then we have package.json, all the React and JavaScript stuff. Then, so the pattern here we are working on is basically Dux pattern, if you have heard of it earlier. So Dux basically deals with the features. So it is it is highly scalable when it comes to scaling up the project or scaling down the project. Maybe removing or adding some modules. So that is why we have chosen Dux module here. So each module is basically a feature. So currently we have 3 features here. That's basically sign up, sign in, and home. So for each feature we have a different folder. So you will see that each folder has a particular file structure here. Okay, so for the features part, we have analytics and common, which is available throughout the project for other components to make use of, like how many number of times a post has been viewed, maybe clicked on, how many number of times a link is visited. So those kind of analytics are available in analytics. So we need to decide what kind of analytics we are going to put in Is it from our API end, or is it from Google Analytics, or maybe third-party analytics integration? That we'll decide, but still we have a folder dedicated to it. Then we have common, which is available, which should be available to all the components or all the features, I must say. Each folder has an index.ts. It basically exports all the functions that are available to other features or other modules. Let's say I have a button component. So the commons have a components folder. It has all the components that could be used in other features as well, like the button, borderless button that I was talking on earlier. So these are all the TSX files. So once we define the components, that will be exported through the index.ts. So when you import them, you don't have to go through all this directories navigating to. For example, I'm in login. I need a button component from commons folder. So normally what we do, import, then bracket, we have button, then from, let's say dot dot slash, then common slash components. No, we don't have to do that. So when it comes to index.ts, you need to only write import curly braces button, then from common. That's it. You will get the components exported automatically from that index.ts. Right. That was one part, and we have API module in the common part only, which defines all the endpoints. So basically, we're working with GraphQL here. So we don't have endpoints. We basically have a one endpoint defined. Maybe different mutations and all. I would suggest structure where we segregate all the functionality, or we'll use Apollo. Anyways, we will be using Apollo client. So the API stuff, integrating with Apollo and all, that will be going into that API module or the endpoints module. So that is one part. Then we have login, sign up, and home. So each folder we have a same directory structure. You might have seen index.ts, functions.ts, reducer.ts. Then we have middleware.ts and the components folder. So components folder is basically the React part that we have, and all the folders are basically JavaScript functions or classes that are available, right? So functions are generalized functions that are to be used with login only. Then we have reducer. So it is a combined reducer kind of thing that we are going to implement. So each feature will have a individual reducer, and the main reducer will be combining all the reducers available. Then we have middlewares, if at all we need middlewares. Like when we change something in other component, we need to reflect in some other component as well. So that is where middleware will come in. So each module has that as well. And reducer, functions, index, and then actions and action types. So that I missed out. So actions are basically defining what actions that could be done on that particular module. For example, a login module has login, logout. So those are the actions available. Then action types are basically strings. So it's the constant that represents a particular action, right? And all the reducers that are available in each feature, that will be implemented in this Redux part. So we have reducers and middleware. So all the features, all the reducers from other features will be imported in this reducers.ts, and then we will be creating a combined reducer, right? Then we have middleware, same thing. So we'll be having all the middlewares from the other features that will be importing them in middlewares.ts, and then we'll be combining them. Right. Functions and index, if at all we need any functions that are need to be implemented through other features or common functions, or that is related more to reducer or redux, then we will be defining these functions. And remember, we should be using pure functions everywhere. We should not be using impure functions. I guess you have idea of pure and impure functions concept, right? Hello.
Yeah, to be safe side, yeah, to be safe side, we should prepare code of conduct or
Okay, yes, yes,
proper documentation of the
correct,
function should be.
correct, correct. So I guess I'll be working on the documentation part as well. So we have at least a folder structure ready, and people can directly dive into the code. And one thing, the project distribution that needs to be done on the project board, and the standards that should be maintained throughout. So the webpack config file that has been created already, that you would see here. Then the Babel stuff is basically for the React part, and we have TS config. I didn't do anything on TS config because I don't know much about TypeScript. I guess it was Archis that he's going to do that. So is Archis free now, or is he working in something else?
No, what I would suggest is we should collaborate with the place which he has experience on script and have the config.json file ready.
Okay. So I guess Archis is
I was not able
he
to
has
understand because voice is reverbing.
sorry, sorry.
The voice it is the back. So I was not able to clearly understand what Shubham said right
Okay.
now. What Shubham said right now.
Okay. I guess.
Yes, if you just mute once.
Okay. Should I mail that PDF?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay, okay. I'll mail the PDF, and I'll be completing that code of conduct document as well, and I'll be sharing that soon. I'm sorry, guys. I have some bit of work overhead, so the time part is a bit concern here. So I'm mostly involved in management part in my organization, so it is taking a bit of time for working that out. But it'll be surely worked out from my side. But yes, we do have a small delay here. I guess this should be completed by the last weekend, but still I wasn't able to do that.
Sai, one
So
question.
anyways, yeah.
For Redux middleware, for example, Thunk,
Sorry, sorry.
for Redux, are we going to
Sorry to interrupt, Sachin. Actually, size mic is working or echoing. So, Sai, can you just mute so he can ask his question?
Right, right. Just a moment.
Yeah, so my question was, are we going to use Thunk or Saga middleware in the Redux?
Yes, we are using Redux Thunk. We are not using Saga.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, that's all I have for now. I'll be updating the code soon, maybe today or tomorrow. That's already public, right? Everybody can see, or is it still private? I guess you were saying that it is going to be public.
We are trying to keep it for the first
Okay.
so that it is
Sorry, can you mute Sai?
Okay.
Okay. So actually, what we were thinking was that we will keep the repositories private until the first version, and then we'll make it public so that if it gives good traction and if more people want to contribute to repository, then they can create pull requests and clone it and by the time we have that first version, so we would have a lot of things set up by then. We would have a code of conduct and some of the things that we are sure of, that this schema works or this schema doesn't, or this service works or this service doesn't. So once all of those things are in better light, then I think we should be going public then, so the repositories will be better maintainable then. But this is my opinion.